There comes a moment in a woman's journey with God when heaven interrupts her softness, not to take it away, but to purify it. A moment when the Spirit whispers with unmistakable clarity, "Stop being a nice girl." Not because niceness is wrong, but because it has become a mask, a performance, a prison that keeps his daughters small when he has called them to stand tall. There is a difference, my dear, between being nice and being righteous. Niceness bows to expectations, but righteousness bows only to God. Niceness says yes, even when your soul is breaking, but righteousness learns to guard what God placed within you. For too long, many women have mistaken silence for humility, exhaustion for obedience, and people-pleasing for kindness. But heaven is calling you into truth, raw, holy, liberating truth. When God says, "Stop being a nice girl," He is not stripping you of warmth or compassion. He is stripping you of fear, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being disliked, the fear of breaking someone's comfort by honoring your calling. God cannot elevate a woman who protects everyone's feelings but neglects her own anointing. He cannot pour fire into hands that tremble at the thought of rejection. There is a holy strength rising in you, a strength that does not shout, does not demand, does not wound, but stands firm. A strength that refuses to apologize for obedience. A strength that speaks the truth even when the room grows silent. A strength that does not need to be validated because it has already been chosen. You were not created to be a shadow in someone else's story. You were not designed to carry your crown in secret, afraid someone might call you too much, too bold, or too confident. My dear, the world has been speaking over you for too long. Now God is speaking, and His voice is the one that awakens destiny. When He calls you out of niceness, He is calling you into authenticity, the kind that shakes atmospheres and breaks generational chains. The enemy loves a woman who stays quiet. Heaven loves a woman who becomes who she truly is. And who are you? A vessel of divine fire, a carrier of truth, a daughter whose presence makes darkness nervous. Nice girls keep peace at the cost of themselves. God's daughters bring peace without losing their identity. Do not shrink. Do not apologize. Do not bend your calling to keep the room comfortable. God is raising you, not the softened, silenced, watered-down version of you, but the woman He dreamed into existence before you ever breathed your first breath. And hear this: when you finally stop being nice, when you finally choose true over liked, when you finally align with His voice above all others, your faith will not weaken. It will shake, it will roar, it will become unrecognizable even to you, because you will realize that the power inside you was never meant to be hidden behind polite smiles and quiet suffering. Beloved, this is heaven's call. Rise into the woman you were always meant to be, not nicer, not quieter, but truer, bolder, holier, and utterly surrendered to the one who formed you. Heaven never called you to be nice. It called you to be true. There is a great difference between the two, though the world has tried to blend them as if they are the same. Niceness is a performance. Truth is a posture. Niceness is what you do to be accepted. Truth is what you live because you are already known by God. Niceness bends under pressure, tries to please everyone, and often betrays your own soul just to keep peace. But truth stands gently, firmly, unshaken, carrying a stillness that comes from knowing who you belong to. There are women who have spent years trying to be nice, saying yes when everything inside them cried no, remaining silent when their spirit longed to speak, shrinking themselves to avoid conflict, hiding their gifts to avoid jealousy, and carrying burdens that were never theirs to carry. They were taught that to be godly is to be agreeable, to be holy is to be quiet, and to be loving is to endure every demand placed on their shoulders. But heaven never taught that. Heaven never asked a woman to destroy herself to keep peace. Heaven never called her to bury her voice so others could feel comfortable. Heaven never called her to pretend. Heaven called her to be true. To be true means to align your actions, your words, your boundaries, and your identity with the God who formed you. It means allowing the voice of God to outrank the expectations of people. It means choosing obedience over approval. It means you stop negotiating with your calling just to be liked. And my dear, once you step into truth, you will discover that some people love the nice version of you because she never challenged them, never refused them, never exposed their manipulation, and never required them to grow. But those who truly walk with God will recognize the beauty of your transformation. They will see that truth does not make you harsh, it makes you whole. Truth does not make you rebellious, it makes you free. Truth does not make you difficult, it makes you aligned. Niceness makes you tolerable. Truth makes you powerful. Niceness keeps you in rooms not built for your destiny. Truth leads you toward the path heaven prepared long before you were born. Niceness says, I hope they don't get upset. Truth says, I hope I do not grieve the spirit within me. Niceness seeks applause. Truth seeks God's approval. And when a woman chooses to be true, she becomes someone the enemy fears because she can no longer be controlled by guilt, pressure, or fear of rejection. A true woman is a liberated woman. She speaks when God says speak. She rests when God says rest. She walks away when God says enough. She carries herself with quiet authority, not to prove anything, but because truth has settled inside her bones. She is not unkind, she is unshakable. She is not rude, she is rooted. She is not rebellious, she is redeemed. Heaven never celebrated the performance of niceness. Heaven celebrates the courage of truth. When you stop trying to be nice and start choosing to be true, you finally step into the woman God always intended you to become. God cannot use a woman who fears disappointing people more than disappointing Him, because a heart tied to public approval will never be free enough to follow divine direction. When your decisions are shaped by who might be upset, who might misunderstand you, who might withdraw their affection, or who might talk about you, your obedience becomes hesitant, delayed, or diluted. You cannot carry the boldness of heaven while clinging to the fragile acceptance of people. You cannot walk in your calling while tiptoeing around the emotions of those who only support you when you serve their comfort. A woman who fears disappointing people becomes a prisoner to their expectations, their insecurities, and their demands, and God cannot move freely through someone who is chained. But when a woman reaches the sacred place where God's voice weighs more than human voices, everything about her shifts. She becomes steady. She becomes clear. She becomes available for divine assignments that require courage, not applause. God does not use perfect women. He uses surrendered ones. Surrender means you have chosen His approval over acceptance, His leading over your own reputation, His truth over the comfort of others. And that choice will cost you something, perhaps the disappointment of those who benefited from your silence, your compliance, or your emotional availability. But God will always give more back than you ever lose. A woman who fears disappointing Him becomes unstoppable. She learns to move even when she is not understood, to speak even when her voice shakes, to say no when her spirit is being drained, and to step away from circles that confuse loyalty with bondage. She discovers that obedience is not about pleasing God out of fear. It is about honoring Him out of love, and love makes courage possible. Love makes boundaries holy. Love makes obedience joyful, even when it is lonely. People-pleasing is a form of worship, an altar you build to others instead of to God. But the moment you tear down that altar, the moment you stop serving human approval, the moment you choose His will above their comfort, heaven can finally trust you with the assignments that require fire, boldness, clarity, and spiritual authority. God cannot pour His power into someone who will give it away cheaply just to be liked. But He will pour it into a woman who has made peace with the reality that obedience will sometimes be misunderstood. When you fear disappointing Him more than disappointing people, you become a vessel that heaven can rely on. Your steps become precise. Your heart becomes fearless. Your life becomes an instrument God can move through without hesitation. And the very people you once feared upsetting will eventually see the beauty, the strength, and the undeniable evidence of God's hand on your life. Grace is not weakness. It is power dressed in gentleness. It is the quiet strength that does not need to shout to be heard, that does not need to fight to be victorious. that does not need to control to stay secure. Grace carries a dignity that cannot be imitated, because it flows from a place deeper than personality or temperament. It flows from the Spirit of God moving through a surrendered heart. Many mistake grace for softness, for passivity, for a woman who lets everything go and everyone walk over her. But true grace is the opposite. True grace is what allows you to stand firm without becoming hard, to set boundaries without becoming bitter, to speak truth without becoming cruel, and to walk away without becoming angry. Grace is strength wrapped in calmness. It is the ability to restrain yourself not because you are incapable of force, but because you know force is unnecessary when God is your defender. Grace is choosing peace without abandoning truth. It is letting God vindicate you instead of wasting your energy proving yourself to people who never intended to see you clearly. Grace does not mean you let everything slide. It means you let God guide your reactions so that your heart stays clean even when the situation is messy. A woman of grace is a woman who has endured storms that could have hardened her, disappointments that could have made her cynical, and betrayal that could have made her cold. But she chose differently. She chose to remain gentle not because life was kind to her, but because God transformed her. She carries herself with a stillness that confuses those who expect drama. She responds with poise that unsettles those who feed on chaos. She walks with confidence that intimidates those who once benefited from her insecurity. Grace is the warrior's armor that does not look like armor. It is the shield that protects your peace, the cloak that covers your heart, the whisper that says, "Be still, I am with you." Grace allows you to endure attacks without losing your identity, to forgive without forgetting your worth, and to rise without stepping on anyone. It is strength under full control, authority expressed through compassion, conviction expressed through calmness. Weakness reacts out of fear, grace responds out of wisdom. Weakness seeks validation, grace knows it already has God's approval. Weakness gives up easily, grace stands tall even with trembling legs. And when a woman walks in grace, she becomes unshakable. She refuses to return insult for insult because she knows her value. She refuses to hold grudges because she has tasted freedom. She refuses to let bitterness take root because she has something far more precious to protect, her anointing. Grace is power, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the holy kind that transforms every space it enters. It is gentleness with a backbone, softness with strength, humility with authority. Grace is the quiet evidence that God lives within you, and that is a power no one can imitate or take away. A woman aligned with God's voice becomes unmanipulated, unshaken, unstoppable, because she no longer relies on the shifting opinions of people to define her next step. When God becomes her compass, no one else can hijack her direction. She is no longer moved by flattery, guilt, pressure, or emotional games. She can see through manipulation because the truth within her has grown louder than the lies around her. She no longer bends to fit the expectations of those who only love the version of her they can control. Instead, she rises into the woman God intended, with clarity that exposes every tactic meant to distract or derail her. When God's voice becomes the anchor of her soul, storms may come, but they cannot uproot her. She may feel the wind, but she will not fall. She may walk through fire, but she will not burn. Her stability is not built on circumstances, it is built on conviction. She is not shaken by temporary setbacks, because she has learned to see them as divine redirection. She is not threatened by closed doors because she trusts the God who closes them. She is not moved by the silence of people because she listens to the whisper of the Spirit. Her peace becomes unexplainable to those who expect her to crumble. Her confidence becomes unsettling to those who once fed on her insecurity. And her endurance becomes a testimony that she is held by something greater than human support. A woman who walks in alignment does not chase validation. She does not beg to be understood. She does not lower her discernment to stay connected to people who drain her. She knows that anything that costs her peace is too expensive. She recognizes that her calling requires focus, and she refuses to let distractions masquerading as relationships steal it. Her boundaries become clear, not out of anger but out of wisdom. Her decisions become firm, not out of pride but out of obedience. And her path becomes straight because she has stopped trying to walk two roads at once, one for God and one for everyone else. Alignment with God turns a woman into someone the enemy fears. Her prayers become strategic. Her presence carries authority. Her words carry weight. She steps into rooms with the quiet awareness that she is backed by heaven. She moves through challenges with a confidence that does not come from her own strength, but from knowing God goes before her. This alignment makes her unstoppable, not because she never struggles, but because she never stops trusting. Not because she is perfect, but because she is surrendered. Not because she has all the answers, but because she follows the one who does. When a woman aligns with God's voice, she stops surviving and starts walking in power. She stops second-guessing and starts discerning. She stops shrinking and starts standing. No manipulation can bind her. No storm can break her, and no obstacle can stop her. Because obedience has made her bold, truth has made her free, and God's voice has made her unstoppable. Stop shrinking to fit a version of yourself heaven never authored, because every time you make yourself smaller to keep someone comfortable, you betray the woman God has been shaping in secret. You were never created to fit inside the limits others place on you. The limits of their fears, their expectations, their assumptions, or their convenience. But many women learn early to shrink your voice so you don't seem loud, shrink your dreams so you don't seem ambitious, shrink your standards so you don't seem difficult, shrink your personality so you don't seem intimidating, shrink your calling so you don't seem proud. And little by little, pieces of you go missing, not because God asked for them, but because people demanded them. Heaven did not write a story where you live as a shadow of yourself. Heaven did not design you to walk around apologizing for your strength, your brilliance, your discernment, your confidence, or your spiritual fire. A woman who shrinks becomes a stranger to her own destiny. She gets used to dimming herself until she forgets she was ever meant to shine. She gets used to enduring what God called her to escape. She remains in rooms where she cannot grow, in relationships where she cannot breathe, in environments that benefit from her silence but fear her becoming. And the tragedy is that she thinks this version of herself is normal, but it is not. It is survival, not purpose. It is conformity, not calling. When you stop shrinking, you start remembering. You remember the dreams that once kept you awake. You remember the strength that once felt natural. You remember the voice God gave you, the confidence He stirred in you, the identity He spoke over you before the world labeled you. Heaven authored a woman who walks boldly, who loves deeply, who speaks with authority, who moves with purpose, who stands tall even after being broken. Heaven authored a woman who refuses to dilute her presence for the comfort of others. Heaven authored a woman who carries fire, not permission slips. Do not shrink to be accepted by those who fear growth. Do not shrink to avoid intimidating those who refuse transformation. Do not shrink to be loved by people who only value you when you are quiet and compliant. Every time you make yourself smaller, you delay what God is trying to release in your life. Every time you dim your light, you deny someone else the permission to shine. Your fullness is not arrogance, it is obedience. Your strength is not too much, it is necessary. Your calling is not inconvenient, it is heaven ordained. Stand in the size heaven designed for you, not the size people prefer. Stretch into your anointing, rise into your purpose. Walk in your true identity even if it makes others uncomfortable. You were not made to fit a story written by human hands. You were made to live the story authored by God Himself. Stop shrinking, my dear. Your destiny requires all of you, not the version you were pressured to become. Here is your as powerful conclusion, written in the same anointed, flowing KATHRYN KUHLMAN style tones without mentioning hurt, perfectly matching the rest of your speech. There comes a moment in every woman's walk with God when heaven waits for her answer. Not the answer spoken with her lips, but the answer revealed through her life. Will she keep shrinking to fit a version of herself that people prefer, or will she rise into the woman God authored before time began? Will she continue pleasing those who drain her, or will she choose the one who strengthens her? Will she settle for nice, or will she step into true? This is the dividing line where destinies are decided, not by force, not by chance, but by surrender. God is calling you to rise, not the small, silent, apologetic version of you, but the woman who hears his voice above all others, the woman who refuses to be manipulated, the woman who cannot be shaken, the woman who is unstoppable because she has anchored herself in the will of God. This is the hour to stand tall, to reclaim the parts of yourself you buried, to walk boldly in the identity heaven spoke over you long before the world ever tried to label you. Your life is not meant to be a quiet survival. It is meant to be a testimony of divine power. You are not here to blend in. You are here to carry the unmistakable mark of heaven. And when you choose truth over niceness, obedience over approval, and alignment over fear, the world will know, not by your words but by your life, that God has touched you. So step forward now. Step without fear. Step without apology. Step into the fullness that was written for you. For when a woman finally becomes who God designed her to be, hell trembles, heaven rejoices, and the world is never the same again.